Tu taua mai e raro, tu taua mai e roto, tu taua mai e waho. Kia tau ai te mauri tū, te mauri ora ki te katoa, haumi e, hui e, tai ki e. E mihi ana ahau e te mana whenua o Taranaki, ara ko Taranaki te maunga, no Europe me e nārangi o ko tipuna, ko Ngāti Pākehā te iwi, ko Bijou te whānau, ko Denise tēnei. Haere mai ki te hui nei, nā reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora everybody, welcome to today's webinar. Apologies for the delay and the technical difficulties. You might be able to hear that my heart's a little bit racy. It's my worst fear is when the technology doesn't work. But we're good to go now, pretty much 90% anyway, and fingers crossed it keeps working well for us. Thanks very much for joining us to hear more about Kai security and community building. We have three wonderful people working in this space to talk with today. They're all working in different ways and in different parts of the country. And as well as their conversation, there is plenty of time for your questions. So please pop those into the Q&A as we go, and they'll be sent to me to ask the panelists later. Right, catching my breath. I can see by the RSVPs that there's a lot of knowledge in the room today too, and as many of you know, community initiatives that focus on Kai security have been around for a really long time. And perhaps it's over the last year, especially since COVID-19, that there's been increasing attention paid to this issue of food poverty in particular, but food security and food systems, a whole bunch of different things. And I think, well, we think what we're seeing at Inspiring Communities is that this whole idea of Kai and good Kai is cementing the notion of not only feeding each other, literally, but in ways that grow community as well. And as you'll hear from the wonderful speakers very soon, it's not easy mahi, this work. It's no walk in the park or the garden, as the case may be. So today we're going to talk about some of what it takes and what is going on across Aotearoa in the Kai security space, particularly as it relates to community building. So we're going to hear some creative and collective solutions, things that build on the strengths of people and the place that we're in as well to develop and drive big picture as well as very local long-term change. All right, that's a kaupapa that reaches well beyond resilience and business as usual, and it requires significant personal and systems change to be successful. Shall we get underway, panelists? Are we all here? Thanks so much to Morena. You'll notice also that we have a change in the lineup today because the lovely Honey Thrupp was unable to join us at the, well, last few days. And instead we have the equally lovely Julia Milne, who's just got on now and is hopefully feeling calm and zen. Yeah, nice laugh. We're enormously grateful, Julia, to bringing your lovely energy, thinking and experience at such short notice as the founder of the Common Unity project to our panel today. Common Unity, for those that don't know, is based in the Hutt Valley, and it began with a community garden project at a primary school about 10 years ago. And my goodness, Julia, it's become so much more since then, hasn't it? Please tell us a little bit about yourself and where you are today.
Sure. Kia ora, everyone. It's lovely to finally make it on the Zoom. Sorry, I don't know if that was my technical issues, but it's good to be here. I'm currently sitting in my office at the Remakery, Te Whareo ko Tahitanga, and I'm listening to a cafe filled with beautiful people eating our local kai and having good conversation, and it's equally lovely to be in my warm office with a drip falling on my head from a leak in the ceiling above. But it's good to be here with you all today. Thank you for having me along.
You're very welcome. Real life, eh, Julia? The drip.
The drip.
The drip. It is also my pleasure to welcome the lovely Heather Lyle to our panel this morning. Among other things, quite a few other things, Heather is the Eco Neighbourhood Coordinator for the Albert Eden and Puki Tāpapa local boards here in Auckland, part of Auckland Council. Atamari, Heather, please tell us a bit about yourself and where you are today. Hopefully no drip on your head.
No, but I did used to have an office where the rats would eat through the ceiling, Julia. So drips I would take. It was a long time ago though. Thanks, morning everyone from all over New Zealand. I've really, we had that little delay, but it was quite fabulous to see where everyone was coming in from. It's so exciting to speak to the rest of New Zealand. I am talking to you today from Auckland, sitting in my house with a sick child in another room. I'm really looking forward to this morning. I'm really honoured to be invited to sit on this panel with Bailey and Julia, and I'm really looking forward to learning myself today as well. Even though I'm working in this community development and food security space, I am learning every day, and I can see from everyone that's actually come in from today that there's so many people working on amazing projects all over New Zealand. So thank you very much for having me. I look forward to a great conversation.
Yeah, awesome introduction, Heather. I think I learn something every day too, and it's one of the great joys of this kind of work in this space. My third equal pleasure this morning is to welcome Bailey Perryman to our panel. Bailey is a lovely man from Christchurch. He's an urban farmer and a compost champion, and he is just bravely, in my opinion, embarked on his PhD about rapid food systems change and repairing rifts in our urban metabolism through decentralized organic waste management. That's quite a mouthful, Bailey. Ngā mihi. Please introduce yourself to our audience today too.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you, Denise, and kia ora and welcome to everyone watching. Yes, it is quite a mouthful, quite a challenge, and I'm looking forward to it. But yeah, I am calling in to you all here from my home in Ōtautahi, Christchurch, where I acknowledge Ngāi Tahu as mana whenua, with these beautiful lands here in the South Island. It's very cold and wet outside, hence the poncho. No drips, fortunately, but yeah, ko Bailey Perryman, taku ingoa. I'm tangata Tiriti, born in Whangarei, and ended up back down here in Christchurch. My Pākehā whakapapa is primarily to Northern Europe and Celtic, kind of Viking and Norman ancestry. But yeah, I think in my heart, I can feel deep connection to land and love working with the soil and with people. Yeah, so I'm really honoured to be here. Echo the same comments about seeing all of the names of different whānau dialing in. It's quite an honour to be here speaking to this topic. I stand on the shoulders of giants.
Ka pai, so well said, all three of you. And it's lovely too, participants, to see you introducing yourself as well. So please keep doing that. It's lovely to see where you're from and a little bit about yourselves there too. So welcome everybody. I'm still taking a deep breath and landing after that little speed wobble. But let's get started, and let's start with you, Julia, and community. Can you please tell us a bit more about your mahi? I know it's very well known and lots of people will have know some of your story or the community story, but tell us about how Kai has helped build community across the Hutt Valley. How did it start?
Sure, it's such a feels like such a long story now, given that this is our 10th year in, but really community started between a conversation with myself and my next door neighbour, who was the principal of a little school here in Lower Hutt called Ipuni School, and she was really concerned about the lack of good food access to the children at her school, and she was equally concerned about the amount of corporatized food that was beginning to be dropped over the top of the children and the community. And we would have these beautiful conversations around what that could look like if the community itself was invited to develop its own local food solution. So we managed to procure the use of this beautiful old soccer field that they had. Ipuni School is a very old school, and we merrily started digging it up. And that kind of grew into a lot of conversation with the local community that was a different community that I don't live in Ipuni. I live about 10 minutes away. So these were different conversations. And there was quite a lot of hard learning, particularly for me. You know, I think sometimes we have this expectation of communities that are having a hard time and are quite under-resourced, that if they are given the opportunity to connect with food, excuse me, grow food, that they're going to leap at the chance. And that was the first thing that I really needed to learn and understand, because despite all kinds of beautiful invitations and all kinds of interesting things that we started creating with the children, the parents didn't want to come, and I needed to stop and learn that actually there's this thing that needs to happen before, excuse me, there's a thing that needs to happen before any kind of conversation about growing food can occur. And so we realised that actually what the community did want to do was sit together. They wanted to sew, they wanted to knit, they wanted soft interactions, and primarily they wanted to alleviate what we now know was quite considerable loneliness within school. So that's where we started from. And in order to get them to have those conversations with me, I started to do quite provocative things with the school community, because I got a little bit tired of being ignored. And at that time, I had this really cute little baby goat. And so I would load my goat into the car every morning and take my goat to school and do road patrol. And to this day, I still have vivid memories of the parents' faces as they were walking their children to school, and they would see me with my goat doing road patrol and knowing that the children would want to stop, and that invariably there would be a conversation that we would probably have to have. And it's quite wonderful to connect with some of those parents now, or have that feedback after a few years of what that really felt like for them. But gradually we built some conversation, and most importantly, we built some trust. And we were able to do some learning together. So I don't think for Ipuni School in particular, us coming into the school and working alongside the school has meant that the parents have all become ardent gardeners and farmers. But what we do know that grew from that is this really embedded culture of food within the school children, which is really quite remarkable. We managed to have a really great memorandum with the school that every single child now gets access to gardening, and they work with our wonderful gardening educator, Hannah Swartz, and she does beautiful work with the children there. And there is this culture that has arisen from the children that enables quite a precious, I think, relationship between the kai and how it is that they are eating. And we're really excited to learn a little bit more about that as we bring some research around what that really means. One of the beautiful things that happened through learning with the children at Ipuni School is that they had a great need. When we talked to them about the things that were really important to them in their community, they wanted to live in places that were beautiful. They wanted a sense of beauty around them, and they wanted to live with this idea in their community that there was enough for everyone. So I'm going to share this story because I think it's completely the essence of how things grow for common unity. That we simply grew a field of sunflowers, and the children took a lot of those sunflowers home and they planted them around these streets, and at the end of that season we packaged them up and they hand painted these beautiful packets, and we sent them all around New Zealand with this idea of pollinating change and connecting with other communities, as well as providing foraging for bees. It was a big bee project for the kids. And we invited Koha back, and at the end of that season we had about $3,000 that the children had raised, and we had this beautiful hui with them where they decided how they wanted to spend that money. And it was just such an incredible surprise to us, because what fell out of that was that they actually wanted to create something for their fathers. There were, by this stage, about 3 or 4 different dads in the community that were interested in coming and doing things with us, but they sure as shit didn't want to knit. And so we, with that money, we contracted a local beekeeper, and he worked with them for a whole year. And then after the first year, we had this beautiful ceremony where the fathers simply returned all of that honey back to the school community. And that sparked this thing that we now call the Beeple Honey Collective, which is our honey enterprise, where people have our hives in their backyards, and we sell some of that to fund our school lunch program or our urban farms, and the rest of the honey we give away. And it was just this beautiful idea that the children could spark something, create something in the name of bringing in their dads. And then now we've got this beautiful honey enterprise. And so about 3 years ago, because there was a commercial aspect to our Wurkiri school, we needed to move out. And so we found this big old plaster factory over the road, and that's called the Remakery, and that's now our home base. We built an off-grid kitchen called a hui across the Hutt Valley, and invited anyone into that space that wanted to be working in the food space with us. And this is the birthplace of our Urban Kai project, where we have 3, 4 quite significant projects where we work at prison. We work with Oranga Tamariki at a residential care facility. We have an agri-hood down in Nainai working with kai ora tenants. And we have various ways in which people can become involved in that project. And all of it is quite complex. Some of it is community driven, some of it is not. It's hard to be community driven when you're working in secure units. So there's a lot of learning about how it is that we work with people that are behind the wire, and how they can have voice into their community, and how they can have a sense of connection to their wider community. And a really good example of that was at COVID, when we all locked down. Our kitchen remained open, and we partnered with Kokori Marae, and 70% of the food that we used during that time to create about 20,000 meals to go out into community, 70% of that kai came from Ramataka prison. So this was our men being able to be completely connected to something that was really scary, and being able to help their whānau along at that time by growing all of the kai. So our community-led response is sometimes a little bit different. It's always about learning and development, but I think the way that it works, and the essence of a success, is that we hold very tightly to this idea that together we grow children. Together we are focusing on the village response to the growing of good, healthy children, and that seems to be our point of being able to interact with multiple diversity, and a lot of different kinds of people coming from different kinds of communities that might not ordinarily be together.
It's awesome, Julia. Thank you for that snippet of your story, because I know it's just a snippet. It's so lovely to hear, though, how one thing leads to another, and how the things we start with might not be, well, I know for myself, my first ideas are just about never my best ideas, and it takes a bit of trickiness and maybe a goat to get things moving in different directions. I love your emphasis that you had there about meeting people, the learnings you've done, meeting people where they're at, including it can't always be community driven, right? And institutions like prisons and caring of children, but you've got this really strong core kaupapa that you were just talking about, like better together, and about the
better together, and everyone needs a goat of some description.
Okay, point taken. We'll work on the goats. I think, Heather, that this is probably resonating with you too, because I know, from what I know about your work, the Eco Neighbourhoods project has certainly evolved and changed, and it's many different things. It doesn't always start and end with Kai either. But why don't you tell us a little bit about how you've seen people work together in that space and make the things that matter to them happen, perhaps?
Thank you, Julia. That was so inspiring. I'm so pleased to have heard you speak about your project. It's absolutely beautiful. I should say, if you can hear the lawn being mowed, my lawnmower guy has just arrived right on me speaking. So
Multitasking.
Yeah, he's in the front lawn. So never mind. Just to tell you a little bit about Eco Neighbourhoods. So Eco Neighbourhoods started 6 years ago in the Albert Eden local board. If you're not familiar with Auckland, we have got 21 local board areas across the Auckland region, and now 6 years later, there's the lawnmower. We're actually in 3 of them, which is really exciting. We work really closely with the Auckland Council's Live Lightly team, and now 6 years later have over 30 groups. So groups are really community led. Although this project was initiated by a local board that was brave enough to want to devolve funding straight back to the community so the community could do the things that they are passionate about, we wanted to keep it as barrier-free and as community-led as possible. So groups are established by neighbours coming together and deciding that there's sustainability projects that they're really passionate about that they want to do. So Eco Neighbourhoods provides a kind of structure and support system to make that work happen. So we provide groups with $1,000 for the first year for funding, and $800 every year after that, as long as the funding lasts. The broad criteria for being involved in forming an eco neighbourhood group is around supporting low carbon lifestyles in households. But because we're starting from where communities and people are actually at in their neighbourhoods and what they're passionate about doing, there's no right starting point. There's no list of things that people have to do. And so the variety and the kinds of activations and activities that groups get involved in is really quite vast. And I'm constantly amazed by the themes that emerge. So it's, for me, the work is, I got involved initially as in a group. I live in an area that's got a lot of state housing, and one of my neighbours put a flyer for Eco Neighbourhood 6 years ago in my letterbox and said, we need to grow food. We need to grow food because our community's hungry. I'd spent a lot of years before that delivering food parcels in my community from food that was given to me by the Freegan network, so people were dumpster diving, and I was taking bottles of beautiful olive oil that otherwise would have been wasted and giving them out. So it was quite random in terms of what people would get. So that was where we really started from. So the theme of food security has been a strong one throughout for eco neighbourhoods. A lot of the work that I do is just about finding community champions, finding people in communities who have a really big idea, but just don't know really where to start, and empowering them to act. So as I was saying, there's a big list of activities that groups do, from pest control to zero waste initiatives, but there's always been this theme of food resilience at a local level, and that's really increased since COVID. Groups can do really, just group focused mahi, where it's just their street, just their neighbourhood group, or they can really focus on bigger, more structural issues, and they do, but I don't dictate to them what they do, which is cool.
Can you give us an example?
So a really good example that I was just going to discuss was, we've got about 8 community gardens so far, with more on the go. We've got community orchards. We've got 2 food forests that have started, and we've got an urban market garden that's being planned at the moment by 2 neighbouring eco neighbourhood groups that have gotten together, and they want to address, again, food security in their community, which is a high state housing area, but they want something. They're finding the community garden model doesn't really work anymore for them. People are working really hard and they're just struggling to find the time to be involved. So the urban market garden model will hopefully work really well alongside a compost collection system, so people have like healthy, nutritious local food, but also local jobs. So they've already started interviewing gardeners from from locals that are interested. It's really exciting. Another great example, though, that we've been working on for the last 18 months is the Waikowhai Food Forest, which is in Puketapa. This group consists of some amazing locals. It's got a strong community champion at the top, and often I find you really need that community champion. They're often there doing things with no recognition, and they're not connected up to all of the other structures and the things that are going on. So finding those people is part of the job for me. This guy is amazing, and he has joined with every single school, every single ECE in the area, and every single community group, along with lots of people living in the community, and they've decided to build a food forest in a reserve space. It's a community in Roskill South, which is on the lowest deprivation index, so it's had issues with ongoing food security. It's also in an area that's going to be heavily redeveloped through housing intensification by Kāinga Ora. So this becomes even more important in this community, because this infrastructure is going to take place of all of the land that's really being lost for warm dry housing that is also necessary. But you know, the existing community do grow a lot of taro, and they do grow a lot of bananas and have small vegetable gardens. So this food forest is really important on that level. I just want to add that it's been an arduous process to get the food forest started. It's been 18 months from start to breaking ground. We haven't quite broken ground yet, but we're almost there. The Auckland, you can imagine building on a park or reserve space is pretty difficult, and there's a process to go through. The Auckland Council Parks process is pretty hefty, and the expectation is you might kind of sign your life away a little bit in it. In saying that, the Auckland Council Parks team that we've been dealing with have actually been really supportive and have wanted to make this happen alongside the community. Similarly, Kāinga Ora has the development team from Kāinga Ora that's leading this housing intensification have really been supportive of this as well. And I think that that's really important, and that's really important across New Zealand, because showing that we need, you know, the community really speaking about this and showing that we need to build future ready, climate ready food infrastructure into housing developments is really, really important across New Zealand, I believe. So that project's really going forward. I think there's so many benefits as well, and we've found this across all of our eco-neighbourhood activities and all of our evaluations that we do, that it's not just about the actual environmental benefits or even the food benefits, which are many, you know, enhancing food security and having local food production from a climate change perspective is also really fantastic. Reducing food waste through composting and improving soil health is great, but also providing places where community can connect, where connections can be made, where social cohesion can develop, where community work collectively to develop themselves. You know, just where friendships are made, where loneliness is relieved. I know during COVID I was contacted by people in eco-neighbourhood groups that said, without eco-neighbourhoods being on my street, I wouldn't have known anyone. And I was so lonely before, and now I have all of these connections. So I find that work, it sends shivers down my spine, actually, because I find that part of the work is so powerful. So, you know, the initiatives themselves, the planting of food in spaces and places is so important, no matter what model you might choose and whatever works for your community. But I think the impact of those places really extend beyond those participating initially. And I just find that really fantastic. I suppose I'll talk a little bit to it later, but things that this kind of project really needs to succeed is funding for someone to be a project manager and a facilitator that understands empowerment, that understands it's not about what you're making, it's about working alongside community, and you're constantly giving power back and knowledge back and information back, and then stepping aside and stepping out. You know, funding for groups as a catalyst. Lots of groups say that they don't get involved because of the funding, but we've got groups, we've made sure that it's as simple as possible to be involved, as barrier-free to be as involved as possible. So people don't have to fill out any paperwork to get the funding or to work with me. They just register their group, and 6 households register. And then I meet with groups, they decide what they want to do, and we go forward. It's as simple as that. If we add in barriers and the great team that have been amazing at Live Lightly at Auckland Council added in too many KPIs and things that I had to achieve, it just wouldn't work, because I'd be asking too much from the communities who actually already are fighting hard to get by. I just want to mention as well that that funding for groups, although we're a really humbly funded project, that funding is really vital, because we wanted to make sure there was inclusiveness and participation in eco-neighbourhoods. So we've deliberately gone out to communities that might not necessarily always engage in this kind of thing. And we've got groups that are solely Kāinga Ora residents who are doing amazing things in their own communities, and they've needed the funds. And I know from my own group, from my own experience, none of us had any money. So that $1,000 went a long, long way to building a food, a community orchard, a movable chicken coop, bees, so many workshops on how to grow our own gardens and how to compost and how to do rainwater harvesting. So really building that household independence as well.
It is really incredible, Heather. I know you could, and I had to jump in, and I'm sorry about that, because
I told you you'd have to.
yeah, I was just thinking exactly that. She gave me license to jump in. Yeah, all the things that you're saying there, I really love how you have made the effort in eco-neighbourhoods, because they're in other places as well, to seek people out. So it's not just if eco-neighbourhoods appeals to you, actually we can help, you know, really look at how we can include people that might not normally be there. Business is unusual, if you like, rather than business as usual in your infrastructure, and also in the way that you promote and seek people out. I really love that, and I can totally attest for it being relatively easy. Oh my goodness, I was looking at some other applications the other day, and this one, your one, is a walk in the park. I think, Bailey, this kōrero will be resonating with you too. There's this theme here about the social side, the community building coming through, the loneliness, the strange way we live our lives in these bubbles of one, or, you know, you can be lonely in a group, in a neighbourhood, and this kai work, it can be community building too. And I know you've got some deep experience in that yourself. Do you want to tell us a bit about what you've been doing?
Thanks, Denise, and thank you, Julia and Heather. It's, yeah, I mean, I do want to share some personal experiences of just my journey over the last few years. I've got a few slides, and we'll muddle our way through those. But yeah, I want to acknowledge a few people first. The last 12 months, I've increasingly been involved in doing some teaching and sharing my knowledge of organic systems with a kura here in Christchurch. The kura is Te Pā o Rākai Hautu, and incredibly inspiring vision of thriving for whānau at this kura, and it's quite a happy accident that I've come to be, you know, really spending a consistent amount of time there. But being with 60 odd kids at a time, making compost and exploring new landscapes and planting and gathering kai is a real privilege, and it's definitely my idea of fun, and I never really realized that. And there's a theme here about our tamariki, and being with our kids and growing kids. And I've had the pleasure of two of my own and a lovely wife. So you know, I think it's time as communities we make that really explicit. But my journey with Te Pā came about primarily as part of a 4-person team. We've been together about 12 months as well, and we're committed to developing better methods for community composting at a commercial scale, which some of you will know I've had some experience with at Cultivate Christchurch, but I left Cultivate primarily because I wanted to continue to explore that opportunity. So just a shout out and my respects to my colleagues, the 2020 Compost colleagues, Hui Alambi, Erin Crampton and Gavin Sol, Goto. Like to acknowledge my research supervisors, Dr. Kelly Dombrowski and Dr. Graydon Diprose, and for offering me a scholarship to spend another 3 years diving deeper into this work. And yeah, my family and friends are a huge part of the support around me, so much love to you all. I've got this photo up, this image up here of a tree system, because I think it kind of is really, Kai security and community building is a really complex thing. Never a simple task, although like a forest and like tree systems and the natural world, it has a real simplicity and beauty to it as well. But yeah, a deep call to action was triggered in me by the 2010 earthquakes here in Canterbury, and have since seen this emergency and a number of others play out over the last 10 years, which really have highlighted and continue to highlight the vulnerabilities in the current food system. And they're impacting people and our communities and the environment in lots of different ways. But at the time of the quakes, I was finishing an honours degree in environmental management and planning at Lincoln Uni, and it's given me a lot of big picture critical thinking, how government works, at least in theory, and social research, and then kind of boring but really necessary skills of report writing and reading long and densely worded texts. But all through this time as well, of doing these studies, I've really felt like the connectedness and the learning was happening through the experiences I created for myself, really, by getting out into my community and volunteering and becoming a community worker, and then being socially entrepreneurial. But I've always had my hands in gardens and various farms, and mostly organic and biodynamic type of growing and farming situations, and people who are super generous with sharing their knowledge. So yeah, got this next slide of Dr. Jessica Hutchings, because I'd just like to acknowledge Jess and her work, and there's a two of her books which are must-reads really for anyone getting into this space. It's again really elegant framework for approaching this work. So acknowledge Jess, a big inspiration for me. The next slide is of Will Allen. He's an urban farmer from the US, and this quote about the kids really grounding and becoming connected by purely touching soil is something I've experienced a lot. And yeah, there's something magic going on there, and we got to tap into that as much as possible. And just over the last 10 years is long enough to start noticing some repeating cycles in this work, and frankly, I'm tired of seeing the systemic issues not being addressed, or a lack of willingness to dive deeper into the roots of the challenges that are presenting to our communities. Many worlds collide here in Aotearoa, and the simple matter is that it's a basic human right for all of us to come together at least 3 times a day around good kai. Yeah, the next slide is, quite a typical daily scene, I guess, in this in the work of growing food. Like, where I've seen success and strength in this field is mostly the approaches that get kai and all the different things that intersect in kai systems, get those things where people can readily access them and participate, even if that just means passing by and noticing. We've got to get in, not in an aggressive way, but disrupt those habitual movements around our community and get kai in there. And so yeah, I'm really inspired by visions of places that are doing the meaningful learning and work, and that reciprocity type of system, which is being described so well by Julia and Heather as well. But yeah, I think the challenge of urban settlements and where we're living, which is 86% of New Zealand's population is living in towns and cities, is that they're being developed in ways that are embedding these systems that are polluting. They're building on our best soils for food production and channeling people into these just-in-time, like, dehumanized, centralized models of getting food to people in their homes and neighborhoods. And yeah, that's what we're up against. I've found the simplest way to start taking back the power to feed ourselves as community is to make compost, and lots of it. It's like I think it's like an acupuncture point, because you can talk about waste, which is just a design flaw. You can talk about soil health. You can talk about biodiversity, digestion, and soils, and how that relates to our bodies and our gut in particular. It generates employment, training, learning opportunities for all ages. It's profoundly about giving back to the whenua and respecting our commitments to Papatūānuku everywhere we stand on earth. And with compost, the transformation happens right in front of your eyes as you do the thing as well. So I think localization, economic diversification, gosh, big words, sorry. And a culturally appropriate contextualization of kai security is the next big movement I see underway here in Aotearoa, and the people on this call, you're a part of it, so big ups to you and what you're doing. It's a real honour to be a part of this panel and share my whakaaro on this topic. So yeah, ngā mihi nui kia koutou, thank you.
And thank you too, Bailey. That's just, again, so many things to touch on, and in just a few short minutes. I love that tension that you're all pulling out, is that, as we densify and our cities can't keep sprawling, we cover off this land. Our state houses were built on big sections so people could have gardens, and we're taking it away, and we're building over our good soils and things like that. How do we marry those tensions up? And each of you also talked about culture, and I'll come back to that in a minute. Bailey, can I ask you two things? In the chat, can you put where the source of that diagram, the first one, is at some point, if you've got it? Yeah. Okay, big ask, thought it might have been. But also maybe the titles of the books, but don't stress if you can't, we can send it out afterwards. Just a query to me is, where did that come from? So let's move into some conversation then across us, because there's lots to talk about and to share, from the infrastructure stuff that needs to be there to help us, to our way we live our lives. And it seems to me that, it reminds me, as I said in the video that I made, our kōrero of a framework that we use in CLD a lot called the quadrants of change. It highlights that, change is personal, it's an individual, it's relational, it's how we get our social stuff going, the things that you were talking about. It's structural, it needs infrastructure, easy things, easy ways of applying for money. It does need money, we need to be paid. We live in a world where we need an economic base, not necessarily only money, because as we know, there's a lot of exchange that goes on. Personal and collective and neighbourhood economies are much more than money economies. Reciprocity that you've all talked about, and the very local as well as that high level stuff. We can't cover all of those things, but it seems to me that cultural change is a big part of this, and empowerment, power. So I'm going to come to you, Julia, first, and just say, do you think if we're truly to make a difference around kai, and I hear from you also that it's not always kai where we start with people are, we start with knitting or with bees or with whatever it is, sunflowers. Do you think we need to fundamentally shift our values and our connections to the places we're in? Because different places grow different things anyway, and that system stuff that Bailey was talking about, that just in time, just enough, there's no fat in the system. Do we need to change our values and our practices to really build community and good kai systems?
Unmuting might help. That's It's just such a big chunky question.
I know, I couldn't stop asking it either.
I think that that for me and for our experiences here in Te Aiwa Kārangi, that we have a sense that there is a new system emerging, and it's a system of collaboration, and it's a system where we are beginning to realise that we can redefine ourselves without the use of money. And I think that was a really good thing to touch on, Denise, is that there is just so many more ways of interacting with each other without needing to be using money, and that place of realizing that I can become abundant in my own community without needing to transact with money is a real game changer. But I think we are still very much held, even though there is a new system growing, and I hear all of these beautiful things that are happening around Aotearoa, is that it's still locked into a wider ecology of constraint. That and the way maybe to free that, I think, is coming back to our mana whenua, coming back to our treaty partnership obligations, and looking at what our true sovereignty looks like. And I think the opportunity for all of us, as we are beginning to emerge with new thinking, which a lot of it is actually old thinking, is what can we collectively bring together that helps dismantle the things that bind us.
Yeah, really good answer. So much in that answer as well. Thank you. Any thoughts, Heather Bailey, on that question? I know, Bailey, I was making you multitask, and men are really good at that. I remember hearing Bill Mollison talk once, and he said something about changing the world, and it will take at least two of us to do that. So we have to work together. But any thoughts on what we're talking about here, about, you know, the cultural change, the power dynamic, the old becoming the new, if you like, and Indigenous knowledge, our sovereignty, our partnership? Big question. Start big.
Yeah, it is a big question. Although, you know, as I acknowledged right at the start, for Pākehā here, you know, it's treaty partnership and acknowledging the treaty is your starting point, and doing the work there. You know, it's for some, you know, my education was as Pākehā as it gets. It wasn't. I've had to seek this out. It didn't come from my family, and yeah, it can be uncomfortable, really uncomfortable, and you can make a right mess of it too. And so, but it's having the courage to trust that you're coming from the right place, a place of love, and a willingness to learn and grow. And yeah, I think the sovereignty bit is huge. You know, there is an awakening happening to that though, and I think there are a lot of Pākehā who actually identify as tangata tiriti, and there's a difference there. Yeah, and gosh, could go in many different directions from there.
Yeah, my apologies. Should have made a better question.
It's okay. I think that the key is it's a never-ending journey, you know, and it's all about relationships. And there is a lot to learn from Indigenous cultures. And in Aotearoa, we have a beautiful and very inspiring and deeply connected Indigenous culture to learn with. So yeah, it's a real blessing.
Absolutely.
I think.
Absolutely, I totally agree with all of that. It's the being up for it too, being up for being wrong, being up for sharing power, being up for learning, being up for changing ourselves, you know, and that can be an interesting process and very humbling. It's learning to be humble. Tangata whenua, mana whenua do that so incredibly well, in so many ways, show us many things of deep knowledge and deep how to be in the world, perhaps how to be in this world here in this place at least. Heather, what are you thinking?
I'm just really thinking, really just to add into what Bailey said as well, is, you know, I really see it as a journey. Coincidentally, I've just set up a Te Tiriti o Waitangi workshop this Saturday that's going all day for free in Mount Albert. If anyone's around Auckland, there's still a couple of places, and that's 40 people coming together who aren't mana whenua to learn from experts more. And I set it up because I want to learn more as well. So I think that's part of the journey. But I think, you know, just that journey of believing that change is possible is really important as well. And part of the roles that perhaps we all play, and all of the people that have tuned in today as well play, is that we believe that change is possible. And I truly do believe that change is possible, and I do believe it needs to happen on all layers, and all of those layers are equally important. So I suppose that's what I really think about it. You know, being hopeful and believing in community is the best first step, and it sounds really soundbitey, but I think another world is possible, and I think that does start with relationships and connections and building things that didn't exist through just actually acting. So finding the people that want to act and acting together makes all of the difference.
Absolutely, I think those are such good words too. And just to let participants know, we're going to carry on to about 11:10 because we started so late. We understand if you need to go, please do send questions through, and we'll keep asking those too. They're coming to me now. I can't read this question, Claire. But yeah, going back to you, Heather, what can people do in the layers, people in the different layers, what can people do that can enable others as well? Because this thing about being better together here too, right? We have agency over ourselves. I mean, the quadrants of change is that too, is I have agency over how I am and how I relate to others. And some of us have agency over structure as well. But together that kind of makes culture. So what can people do? What do you think of people doing to enable others?
You know, it's really interesting because more and more lately in the work that I'm doing, which all interlinks, all of the things that I'm doing are starting to link along with one another so much more. And more I'm just setting up meetings between people. And I am loath to call them network meetings because it just sounds so corporate, and that's not what we're doing. But I'm just setting up spaces and places for people to come together. And, you know, I really was watching the last week in South Kaipara. There's a little bit of a social media ad going around on Facebook where there's an invitation for people to have a cup of tea together and decide and discuss in families or friendship groups or as a community, big and small groups, what they want to do around food security in their area. And I love that it's just started with that. And I think that that's so important. So I've just been bringing people together to have cups of tea and talk, and that talking together creates ideas, and then you can make plans for action, and then you can go out and make it happen. I think it's really important in that kind of networking and connecting space as well, to invite people in that you might not normally invite in. So to think about who's in your local government that you should be talking to if you haven't talked to them. You know, finding those people within local government, for me it's the local board or people within the Live Lightly team who have made eco-neighbourhoods actually possible because they're within the system, they understand the system, and they're willing to subvert it or turn it on its head or figure out ways to get around things to make it easier for people to be able to do the things that they're really passionate about doing.
Yeah,
so,
great
you know,
answer.
it's really simple, but actually just getting together is an amazing.
And it is really simple, right? And the cups of tea remind me of you, Julia Milner, who used to call herself, and possibly still does, the tea lady. How important is tea in your world, Julia?
Oh, well, I think it all starts with a cup of tea, doesn't it? Because and I think, and again, there are aspects of our community, particularly our Māori community, that show us so well that slow, gentle conversation and the slow, gentle development of relationships that revolve around a cup of tea and some kai together, and deep listening.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, the deep listening, we're doing a lot of talking tonight, but I think probably all of tonight today, all of us have learned a lot through our listening. Would you say so, Bailey? You've done a lot of learning, both, you know, with your hands in the soil and academically in different systems. Listening's a pretty key part of it too.
Yeah, I'm fortunate I have a younger brother who is infinitely wiser, old soul than me, and he shares lots of gems. Ollie does, but one in particular that stood me well over the years is to be quick to listen and slow to speak. And I think I was also brought up with a healthy dose of respect for my elders as well. And it's something I'm trying to ingrain in my kids, but I don't know how well I'm doing at that. But yeah, and there's a lot to be said in this day and age for switching off and getting outside and listening to the birds and the rhythms of the natural world out there. They are there's one fellow I do a bit of work with here locally, and is big respect for as well. Mania Cunningham is a potato grower from Kokorarata. But he said the river here. We're talking about the possibility of urban farming along the land that's been cleared around the Avon or Takaro River here in Christchurch. And he said the river needs friends, and organic gardeners will make great friends for the river, and to back ourselves to do that. And so yeah, I think the more we can, you know, the cups of tea and the people is essential. I totally agree. And you know, the same can be said for switching off and just being in the world.
Absolutely, such gems in there. The river does need friends. We all need friends to really make a difference. It'll take at least two of us. Let's have a couple of final words. Julia, what gives you hope?
Actually, I just picked this up from my desk because I saw Jessica's beautiful books being recommended before, and this is Jane Ridderford's book, and I don't know if anyone has come across it. She's just been in New Zealand and will return here to work with us all later in the year, and she talks about the I, we and the planet, and I just love that framework because it's based on the 3 baskets of knowledge story, which is of course a Maori proverb. And I guess for me that just completely encapsulates what I think we're all talking about today, is that actually that we cannot thrive within our food system and within our community unless we put into context the fact that we sit within a wider ecology that needs our love and our care too, and that our communities are ecologies, and that the plight of one is reflected in the plight of the other.
Beautiful, beautiful last hopeful words. Heather, what gives you hope? You're muted, sweet. Oh, I was trying not to call anyone sweet today, but there we go. You are my sweet.
Anytime. I really think what gives me hope is are these kind of connectings with people, actually, you know, so coming together to discuss these kinds of issues, realizing that there's people across New Zealand who are all really concerned. I think COVID has shown us that we can act quickly and really decisively. There's no more excuses for not acting quickly and decisively. We have done it, so we can do it again. I kind of live in eternal hope because I choose to live that way. I think in the face of climate change and all of the issues that exist, we could really get down about it. And I really think then when I start getting down about it, about acting locally more, you know, so these big global issues, but it's okay, pick one thing and just start. So that gives me hope. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks very
when you
much.
have a bit of power to action, it can really help with the hope and the reducing the hopelessness, which is so pervasive sometimes. What gives you hope, Bailey?
Yeah, children, and they're our future, you know. So they're just that endless curiosity and hunger for adventure and fun. So children and soil and all our friends in the soil who time and time again just amaze me at just how quickly transformation can happen, and how a really neglected land or place can burst into life and give so much. So our children and our soils is where, you know, my hope.
Where it's at. Yeah, awesome. Thank you. I want to acknowledge the other questions that have come in. We have run out of time. There's some questions around how to measure outcomes and a number of other things as well. And I just invite those people to, you can email me from, you'll see my email on Inspiring Communities website, and we'll endeavour to get you some answers. So if you take one more step to email me, I promise I will get back to you and have possibly some of these panelists contribute to that answer as well. Thank you so much for sticking with us and sticking with us through our initial technical difficulties. Big thanks to our wonderful panelists in these very short snippet conversations. We could probably talk for a lot longer. Well, there's no probably really in that, is there? Have a couple of final or closing announcements just to make note of it before we wrap up today. And I'm just going to read these from Claire. So to carry this kind of kōrero forward, Inspiring Communities does offer a number of one-day CLD workshops. They're designed to help you strengthen your community-led practice, and there's some stuff on evaluation there too, but also about local connections and really dynamic, relatively small group environments. So check out the website for those. They cover things like collaboration, facilitating groups, conversation, activating CLD, and the majority of them this year running from June till October. Have a look and see what is already there, or contact a member of the team. And we're also really happy to create something specific for what you need. It's also really important to our team that locals leading change, and that came up so much in here. People who want to participate in and contribute to our learning experiences are able to do so. So if money is an issue, let us know and we'll work something out. We'll do our best to as well. And if you would like to support us, because money can be an issue for us as well in reaching many communities, we offer you can make a koha contribution on our website if you are able to. So more information about all of this is in the About section on the Inspiring Communities website, or within the follow-up email that the lovely Claire will send out to after this webinar, and that will include a copy of the presentation along with some helpful links and resources. So thank you panelists, thank you everyone who's been with us today, and I'll close us with a karakia and we can go on and have a wonderful day. Please join in. Unuhia, unuhia, unuhia ki te uru tapanui. Kia wātia, kia māma, tīnākau, te tinana, te wairoa i te ara tangata. Koia rā e rongo, whakairia, ake ki runga, kia tina, tina, homie, huie, tai kie. Go well, everybody. See you next time. Mā kia wā.